Friends, we gather together this morning to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Marjorie Brock. Marjorie's family so very much appreciates your being here this morning, which offers them a great deal of comfort and support. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are as a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, you mortal creatures." Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. The author of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms describes for us in language that is both poignant and succinct the nature of the good life and the fruits of that life. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked or taken the path of sinners or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us take comfort now together in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Marjorie Brock died early this past Wednesday morning at the age of 95. She lived a long and a full life. She indelibly touched, the lives of all who knew and who loved her. We will miss her. Marjorie was born on November 25th, 1922, to Victor and Irene Wise. She attended the fabled Roxborough Junior High School, and in 1940 she graduated from Shaker Heights High School. Thereupon she enrolled at USC in California and remained there for 1 year. Evidently, her parents wanted her closer to home, and so Margie returned from the West Coast and attended retailing school in Boston for another year. Then she returned to Cleveland and took a position as a buyer for the Halley Brothers Company. Along the way, she met and fell in love with Alfred Brock. Within a year, she and Alf, that's what she called him, she and Alf were engaged, and soon thereafter, on May 10th, 1944, they were married by Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver at the Wade Park Manor. It was the heart of World War II, and at that point, Alf was stationed in Lincoln, Nebraska, where the young couple moved for the duration of his service. Returning to Cleveland, Margie and Alf moved to Shaker Heights for a period of time, and then moved to Cleveland Heights, where they both raised their two boys, Tom and Rob. When I met with Tom and Rob yesterday afternoon, I asked them to tell me about their mother. Margie, they began, was a multifaceted person. First of all, she had deep loyalties to purpose and to place. A lifelong Clevelander with lengthy family roots in our community that went back to the 1850s, Margie had deep pride in her city. She was also a lifelong member of our temple Tifereth Israel, beginning when she was 5 years old and extending without interruption for the next 90 years of her life. Now, Margie had her convictions about her temple and its purposes. When, for example, Hebrew began to creep back into our liturgy, and she experienced the Rock of Ages sung in Hebrew, she remarked that she didn't recognize her temple anymore. Yet, this did not cause her to resign or to stop coming. No, Margie's loyalties were for life, and they were impervious to the changes that inevitably come along. She also cared deeply about volunteering, which she did at the Hillcrest Hospital for more than 35 years. She wanted to contribute to her community, and this was one of the ways in which she could do it. She volunteered in the gift shop and at the information desk, wherever she was needed. And even at the end of her life, when her incapacity had increased, she still thought about returning to the Hillcrest Hospital. Margie also spent a good part of her life in retail, for which her Boston year had trained her. She was a trusted employee at the clothes closet on Fairmont Boulevard, working there from the day it opened until the day it closed. And when the clothes closet finally did close, Margie went on to work at other stores that specialized in children's clothing. But at the core of Marjorie Brock and all that was about her was her talent for relationship. Indeed, Marjorie Brock was a people person. She almost instinctively reached out to others, connected emotionally with them, loved to be with them. She had friends of 9 decades, and she had friends of 8 days. She had friendships that went back to kindergarten and friendships that had only recently developed in her apartment building and among the nurses who were tending to her. Everyone loved her, and those of you who knew her know exactly why this is so. She led with that wonderful and inviting smile of hers, a smile that conveyed warmth and caring, a smile that actually led to warmth and caring. Margie was genuinely interested in other people, and she had the ability to make people feel good about themselves. In a word, Margie drew people to her, and in turn, she drew energy from them. Indeed, these friendships deepened her life as they also deepened the lives of those who knew and who loved her. I myself knew Margie for many years, and I can attest to her great and inviting ease with others. When I would see her, she would immediately embrace me with that warm smile the caressing manner with which she looked you straight in the eye, and the way she made you feel at that moment, made you feel that you were the only person in the world for her. At these moments, you knew for certain that she cared about you. Now, being a multifaceted person that Margie was, there were, of course, other sides to Margie's personality and character. Yes, she was warm and caring and loving, but she could also be assertive and tough. She had strong and strongly articulated values. She had a clear moral compass and a robust sense of who she was. Tom and Rob told me that their mother had high expectations for herself, and she had high expectations for them. When one of her children did or failed to do something that she considered important, they could be sure that they would hear from her. Whether it was something as inconsequential as eating your peas and carrots, or as important as doing excellent work at school. And when they violated her canons of right and wrong, they paid the price. It was, they told me, her way or the highway, though they added that most of the time she was right. But speaking of multifaceted, one of Margie's cousins wrote the following to me, and I quote her. When I think of Margie, the first thing that comes to mind is fun. She was a woman who was fun to be with and who was always eager to be out and enjoying her friends and her family, end quote. And she evidently loved music and loved to dance to the big band sound. According to her son, she often, as a teenager, went to downtown Cleveland or to Akron to listen to and dance to the music of Benny Goodman, the Dorsey Brothers, and Glenn Miller. She used to say about herself that though she was conservative about going out with boys, they would ask her and she would accept when it was a matter of going out dancing. Now, those of you who knew Margie well know that she spoke her mind directly and unequivocally. And she could be stubborn. Indeed, she always knew what she wanted, and she needed, and what she needed, and no one was able to talk her out of her certitude. Her independence was crucial to her, and she fought for it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it, seems to have been her mantra. But, as one of her closest friends said to me the other day, and I quote, though Margie was stubborn, and though everyone knew this about her, we all loved her dearly, end quote. She was simply one of those people who was always there, really there, head and heart and hands there when you needed her. She was a fabulous friend and a fabulous neighbor. She knew when to be present and when her presence might be intrusive. She literally had a gift for deep and genuine and abiding friendship. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of her most important lifetime friends, her sister Lizzie. Margie and Lizzie were extremely close to one another. Though they had different personalities, they were best friends and talked to one another almost every single day. And according to her cousin, when Margie and Lizzie were together, they finished each other's sentences. And when Liz, who was soft-spoken, felt that Margie was dominating the conversation, Liz always found a way to let her know. But the love between them, this cousin goes on to say, the love between them was palpable, a treasured relationship for both of them. And I want to mention the wonderful 10-year relationship Margie had with Al Abel, whom she called A. Tom and Rob told me that Al was very much like their dad, and that Margie and Al had many gratifying years together before Al passed away. And in fact, Al's children, Jack and Barbara, had their own relationship with Margie and remained close to her even after their father died. Margie is survived by her sons, Tom and Rob, by her daughters-in-law, Susan and Belinda, by her grandchildren, Sam and Gabby, Laura and Zeke, Annie and Adam, and Max and Allison, by her great-granddaughter, Sophia Ruth, and by many loving cousins. She was predeceased by her parents, Victor and Irene, by her husband, Alf, by her dear friend, Al Abel, by her sister, Lizzie, and by her brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, Evie, Bert and Amy, and Irving and Ruth. Marjorie Brock lived a charmed and a blessed life, and she knew it, and she rejoiced in it. I am blessed, she said. And then she added, I must have done something right. She cultivated nurturing relationships with important institutions. She was surrounded by her myriad and devoted friends. She enjoyed loving relationships with 2 men. And she had 2 fabulous sons and adoring grandchildren who called her Jima. Those who loved and admired Margie Brock will never forget her. Zichrona livracha. Her memory will always be our blessing. Amen.
I always love the way the tradition of reading the Torah portion captures our hearts exactly where we are. And it's true of this week. In this week's portion, we read of Abraham sitting by his tent, and when he sees the angels coming toward him, he invites them to stay and to rest a bit. Suddenly there's company for dinner, and Sarah must spring into action to make a meal and offer hospitality. Her role is so often overlooked, but she's the manager of the success of the event. Like Sarah, Margie was often in the background, but she was no less the one who made us feel welcome at whatever event or occasion we attended together. I can recall her warm smile greeting me so often at temple functions. She often accompanied her cousins, Bobby and Jim Rich, and her adoring sister, Lizzie. And amongst their large group of friends, many of you included, there was often that irreverent laughter. You could be sure that Margie offered one of her swear words as a commentary to something said. I adored that about her. From the time I joined the Temple family, I was treated to this elegant, perfectly adorned, statuesque kind of woman who never stood on ceremony with me, and who told you straight out what she needed you to know. She was loyal, and you always knew she had your best interest at heart, even if you might disagree with her. That was what made her a good friend to so many of all ages, including me. I valued her strong will and her opinions as we planned together or as we shared ways to fix a situation. She was easy to talk with, and with an expressive face that you rarely needed to ask what she was thinking about. It was easy to reevaluate one's position without having the words transpire between you. I saw Margie around town frequently, at great places to eat, or enjoying the arts, and occasionally even shopping for something beautiful. But in my mind's eye, the other place that I see her is at the Hillcrest Hospital gift shop. Just about every time that I visited a patient there, I would make it a point to stop by the gift shop to say hello to Margie and to our dear friend Martha. They made that a stop filled with encouragement, and no doubt Margie lifted the spirit of all those who came to go shopping, but who needed a friend in that quiet moment. She was a volunteer who knew when you needed support, and she made her circle of friends your circle of friends, even in that little place, in that special place. Margie was fun to be with. She loved to be surrounded by family and friends, but she would get very serious if you tried to help her. As her own health occasionally had a setback, she wanted to remain independent, and she was not very gracious about the way she told you that she was refusing your help. She scoffed at you and was very quick to make a change in the conversation. To her sons, I have to call you by the names that your mom always called you by Tommy and Robbie. I know we talked about switching to grown-up names, but your mom was so proud of you. She'd be excited when you had plans to be with her, and she loved to show you off like the little boys you once were when you came to Temple. As grown men, she valued your time, and Margie so appreciated your attentiveness and the beautiful families that you created. As your Gima, she was also so proud of her grandchildren. One of the most special things about the time that Margie had left was the opportunity to grow closer to Rob and to Tom, and to expand her great loving heart into the memory of so many people in her family and her friends. Margie's niece, Amy Kaplan, who visited her recently, wrote these words about her beloved aunt in those last days. She wrote, "She was weak, but as sharp and funny as ever. She knew she did not have much time left, and she said to me, 'Amy, I am not focusing on how little time I have left. I want to focus on how I die.' And Amy wrote, 'To me, these are the words that can be spoken only by someone who comes to the end of her life with few, if any, regrets.'" Margie was that rare woman who had it all and shared it all generously. Her spirit was always open to us. She'll be missed in all the places that she made more interesting and much more fun by her presence. Zichronah livracha. May her memory continue to be our very special blessing.
I now want to call on several members of Margie's family. First, her sons. First, Rob, and then Tom.
If Marge were here today, I know she would say, "Robbie, don't talk with your hands. It's not polite." So, Mom, I'll try and keep my hand at my side here. Okay. Before I start talking about Mom, I first want to spend a minute thanking so many of you who came today to say goodbye to her. You were such wonderful friends and incredibly helpful to her over the years. Since Tom and I were out of town, so many of you really became her extended family. And I don't know what we would have done without all of you, seriously. I'm sure I'm going to miss a bunch of people, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say a special thank you to the residents of Woodhawk, who all reached out to her on a daily basis, and were really family. Gloria and Mel, Lana and Michael, Lori, Miriam, and Jay. And also thanks to her special friend Martha, who took her out every Friday night to temple and to dinner, and took care of her, and just a special friend. I'd also be remiss not to mention her dear lifelong friends, who I believe are also here today. Arlene, Mitzi, Donnie, Georgine, who I believe who have been friends probably for 7 or 8 decades, true friends. And I also want to thank the Abel family, thank you, who really became a second family for her. When I describe what it was like to grow up in the Brock household, I can't help but think what a great experience it was in so many ways. Marge and Elf were both kind, loving people, and both provide a tremendous moral compass to Tom and myself. I never saw my parents fight. In later years, my mom used to tell me that on the rare occasion she got upset with Dad, he occasionally liked to have a cocktail or two, for anybody who knew Elfie, silence between them might occur, but I certainly never noticed it, and it never lasts long at all. For those of you who remember the old Leave It to Beaver TV show, having Marge Brock for a mom was very similar to having June Cleaver as a mother. My mom, like June, would clean and vacuum the house dressed impeccably, and this would always be right after the cleaning lady left. Okay. The only difference, I think, was that I doubt that June Cleaver's favorite expression was, "Oh shit." Okay. It was really wonderful that she got to spend her whole life in Cleveland. She was a true Clevelander through and through. I remember her telling me stories of how her own grandmother saw Lincoln's casket being pulled on a train through the Terminal Tower in 1865. It's really kind of amazing. Mom was so proud of her Cleveland roots and her Cleveland heritage. Her mother, Irene, was much like my mother in many ways. Smart, friendly, and shall we say, having strong convictions about everything, how things should or shouldn't be done. Vic and Irene's home in Cleveland Heights provided her with a very happy childhood. Lizzie was her big sister, and for their entire life, they really remained best friends. It was a special friendship, as my mom kind of remained the extrovert. And while Aunt Lizzie always managed to convince my mom that things might not always be perfect and try to keep things in perspective. The Wise girls, as they were known, were truly a tremendous combination. Anyone who's ever been out with my mother knows one thing for sure. She knew more people and cared about more people than anyone else thought possible. When you walk into a restaurant, into Hillcrest Hospital, the mall, or the temple, she would certainly know somebody there. She then proceeded to tell Tom or I who the people were, who their parents were, where they lived, what they were like, etc. But in talking about the people, it was never about money or what they had materially. It was always about what kind of person they were and how they lived their lives and how their lives intertwined. She always said there was a big difference between money and class, and it always focused on the latter. In her vernacular, doing the classy thing meant doing the right thing. Marge got her energy from other people, from all of you here today. And I think that's what allowed her to have such a happy and long life. And again, Tom and I thank you so much because we weren't here. You were there every day for her. No matter how much her back or her legs may hurt, she got up to play bridge with her friends, to go to the hospital and talk with the people there, would call Lizzie 5 times a day, whatever it took to put a smile on her face and enjoy the day. My mom will never be known for her flexibility, yet in many ways, that really doesn't do justice to her. She really changed and grew in many ways. As I mentioned, she loved my dad more than anything in the world, and they were blessed with more than 40 sensational, truly happy years. She said there would never be anyone else in her life after my dad. But then A came along, and Mom gave him a chance, and they were lucky enough to have each other for a few years, and it turned into a very happy and special time for both of them. My mom did so many nice things that people will never know about. When driving down Fairmount Boulevard to see her own mother, she would stop at the bus stops to pick up the cleaning ladies if it was raining because she didn't want them to get wet, and would drive them down to the rapid stop at Cedar Hill so that they wouldn't have to stand outside. And she did this many times, and I was with her. Growing up, our phone rang constantly all night, as friends would always call to schmooze, ask her about her opinion, whatever the issue was, big or small, whatever was going on in their lives. Her strong sense of right and wrong and good judgment, I believe, earned her the respect of everybody she met. Marge truly enjoyed interacting with people, and people really enjoyed being around her. I guess in today's vernacular, they would say she had tons of BFFs, as my kids would say, okay? Living in a different city, she never really was a hands-on grandmother. But over the last dozen years or so, she became involved as she could with all of her grandkids. Sam, Annie, Laura, and Max all joked that their family rank depended on who called her last. And God forbid they didn't cash the latest birthday check, she could see, within 32 minutes, or they were in big trouble. All the kids and their spouses, Adam, Gabby, Zeke, and Allison, truly loved their G-Mom, as they could see what a special person she was. And she loved them back dearly. Her purse was always full with pictures of the grandkids. They called often and visited frequently. Just a couple months ago, Laura was able to bring little Sophie, and my mother, at 95 years old, was crawling on the ground with little Sophie playing games. It was unbelievable. And they were all such a source of pride and joy for her. Let me end by saying how fortunate Tom and I were to have Marge Brock as our mother. She was loving, wonderful, and truly special. She'll be missed and thought about every day of our lives.
Robbie, I think in this one instance, she'll forgive you for talking with your hands. Just this once. I, too, would like to thank all of you who've been so kind to our mom. It meant a lot to all of us, the whole family. And she had some special relationships, very special relationships, and was dear to all of you. As I thought about this day and words to describe Marge and her love and kindness, I was thinking there's just so many adjectives and words that you'd have to come up with to describe her. And I was thinking that it was like when, for those of you that are Jewish, in the high holidays on Yom Kippur, there's a prayer which is the Vidui, and it goes from A to Z, the sins that you've committed during the year from A to Z. Starting with arrogance and ending in zeal. And beyond, I was thinking about Marge, and you start thinking about all the adjectives that you could use, whether she was attentive or caring, all the way to the end of the alphabet of warm and zesty. But there were these, as Robbie alluded, there were some letters in the middle too, like R for rigid or S for stubborn. But she was the whole package. She was just an incredibly complex human being and just a wonderful human being. So I thought maybe it would be interesting to tell you just a couple stories which I felt, and Robbie and I talked about, might illustrate Marge to you. The first took place in 1950. And my dad had just changed jobs, and money was very tight. And they decided that they would have to resign from Oakwood Club. Now, to put this in perspective, my grandparents and the Wises and the Grosses were founding members of Oakwood Club. And so this was a big deal. But my mom and dad discussed it, and they decided they're just going to afford it. As my mom often said, listen, if you can't buy somebody a drink, what's the point? So they resigned, and she gets a call from a very close old friend of hers, who was also a longtime member of the club. And she said, Marge, what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to be lost. without that. And she looked at her, she said, you know what? The people who are my friends, excuse me, the people who are my friends will be my friends all my life. And the people who won't be, who needs them? And that was her. She had a great sense of right and wrong, a great sense of values, and understood the importance of friendship. The second story took place on my birthday in May 14th, 1985. Now, by the way, that happens to be the birthday of another member of our family, my daughter Annie, who was literally, that was her birthday. So Annie was born on my 38th birthday. And unfortunately, my dad had died 2 days earlier, May 12th. And May 14th was the day of my dad's funeral. And we went down to the Grease Chapel at the Old Ansel Road Temple. And Rabbi Silver delivered a eulogy and a very nice service. And we went back to my mom's apartment afterwards. And the rabbi said a prayer and to the people at the Shiva and gathered. All of a sudden, my mom gets up and walks into the kitchen. She disappears. 2 minutes later, she emerges and she's got a huge white Huff birthday cake. And on it, it says, "Happy birthday, Tommy." Now, that's quite a person that could, in a time of grief, could extend themselves like that. It just told you a lot about who she was. We got a chance to spend a lot of time together over the last couple of weeks, which was wonderful for me. And we talked about everything and nothing, and it was just despite being a sad time, the end of her life, it was a wonderful time. And, just to watch her interact with the nurses and the friends that came in, it was terrific. And I was reminded, I had seen a movie, most of you probably haven't seen it, it's called 1,000 Clowns. And in this movie, it was in the 1960s, this kind of a recently fired ad executive, Murray Burns, played by Jason Robards, is trying to hold on to his nephew, who he has custody of. And he has a brother, Arnold Burns, played by Martin Balsam. And Arnold is trying to convince Murray that he needs to get his act together. He couldn't be so. Pardon me? He's going to lose this kid if he doesn't start to get a job and do something responsible. So they're sitting in a Chinese restaurant, abandoned Chinese restaurant, and Murray is berating Arnold, and Arnold is a successful businessman, and he says, I have to tell you, Murray, I hear you, but I deal with my clients well. I'm an honest man. I cut a few corners. I walk the walk. I talk the talk. But I have to tell you, I'm the best possible Arnold Burns. And as I sat there looking at my mom, excuse me, as all the people came in, when all the help that, that worked at the hospital and at the rehab center, there were the aides and the doctors and the nurses and all the friends and everybody else that came in, and everybody you touched their face and said, "Oh, honey, how are you?" and just made an incredible connection with them. And I thought about the friends that came in, whether it was Arlene, who she'd known Arlene Libman, who's been her friend for 70 plus years, all the way to her most recent friends of 3 years, like Gloria Cohn, that just meant so much to her in the way she connected with them. And so I couldn't help but thinking about this movie and thinking that Marge was the best possible. Marge Brock. Amen. Thank you.
I now want to call on Marge's 4 grandchildren, Sam, Laura, Annie, and Max.
everybody. I'm Max Brock. I'm one of Jima's 4 grandkids. I was the baby in the family for a long, long time. I was the baby grandkid. I recently got upstaged by my niece Sophie, but I can't complain too much because she was pretty adorable. So as a grandkid, I only knew my Jima during the last quarter of her life, but I'm pretty sure the Jima I knew was very similar to the Marge you all knew. Jima was always very true to the things she liked and the people she loved. Jima loved talking on the phone. She loved playing bridge. She loved watching the news. And most of all, she loved being surrounded by the people she cared about, both family and friends. I think she had a remarkable group of friends that we've heard a lot about that she grew up with in Cleveland, lived her whole life in Cleveland, and aged with as she got older in Cleveland. And she cared so much about them. And besides these friends that she grew up with, she was so talkative and outgoing with strangers she just met and became close friends with people really late into her life, and it was really special. She got most of her energy by other people, and she was always chatty and outgoing. She got so much joy by other people, so I know how happy she would be to see everybody here. She didn't let her age slow her down at all. At 95, she was liking photos on Facebook and commenting on my wedding photos, and she still drove, which gave us all a big scare, but she really did a lot. She volunteered at Hillcrest until the weeks before she died, and then at 95 this past summer, she was on the floor playing with stuffed animals, playing with my niece Sophie, and being just so full of life. So it was so amazing to see. I feel blessed to inherit many great qualities from my Jima. Most famous, I think, is my Brock waddle that my dad also got, and my propensity to be a touch stubborn, but I think my dad can vouch for both of those. Jima always ended our phone calls or goodbyes by telling me to be a better boy. I still don't know quite what she meant by it. As my sister will tell you, I'm pretty uncontroversial. I don't stray I don't stray too far from the beaten path. But I found a lot of comfort that she also said it to Sam, her other very straight-edge grandson. But hearing all the speeches today, I think my grandma had such a strong moral compass. She always tried to be a better person. And even though she was so proud of us and all of our accomplishments, she just wanted us to make sure that we kept true to who we are and true to helping other people and ourselves. So I always said, yes, Jima, I'll be a better boy. And I think as I get to know her better now, but hearing people speak, I have a better understanding of what she meant by that. So it was clear, through her life how much she cared about the 4 of us and how much she loved all of us. And as we got older, she got to know our partners well, and she loved our partners so much and was always asking about them. So I could not have had a more supportive grandmother, and she was really always there for us for all of our major life choices. So thank you all for being here, and we love you, Jima. Thanks.
So, in all of our lives, we can only hope to know someone who is a force to be reckoned with. Someone who builds us up, who shapes us, and who teaches us how to find our way in the world. For me, and for many of us here today, one of those people was my grandmother, Marge Brock. My name is Annie, and I'm one of Marge's 4 grandchildren. My husband, Adam, often joked that my grandma is a legend. And while we can certainly all crack a smile at that statement, we also know that it is quite true. My grandma was not one to go quietly through this world, and we are all better off because of that. She was strong, and she was strong-willed. She was herself through and through, and she never hesitated for a moment to tell you what she really thought. And although she may not have always agreed with you, she set a firm example for me to always do the same. Although I am sure, as others have said, that my Brock stubbornness in large part came from her, she also showed me the importance of being myself and of speaking my own truth, too. Grandma Marge loved fiercely. She loved Cleveland, and she loved her friends. She loved all of you. And it certainly showed. Anywhere I ever went with her, she was greeted by almost every person in the room. She remembered every story, and she asked about every family member. Her roots in this community ran deep, and she couldn't have been prouder about that. But most of all, she loved her family. The way she spoke of her kids, her grandkids, her great-granddaughter, she couldn't have been prouder of us too. She would often say that her grandkids made the world a better, brighter place, and she felt lucky that that was the case. About a year ago, I went to visit my grandma. I slept in one of the twin beds in her bedroom, and she slept in the other. Of course, she had to tell me the next day that she had to check me several times in the night to make sure I was still breathing, because surely a peaceful sleep like mine must mean that I was dead. That was my grandmother, through and through, unendingly caring, but also with a strong dose of Jewish neuroticism. But she also said that she hoped that I always remembered those visits, even when I was a grandmother one day, and that while I am her granddaughter, she was also grateful to call me her friend. And that is also my grandma, through and through. Her gratitude was infectious. I feel deeply grateful to have known her, to have been loved by her, and to love her. And I know that we all feel the same. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura. I always thought of Jima as embodying several different polarities. On one hand, she was classy. She was always well put together, prompt, polite, and upheld social convention. Even as she aged, she never looked or felt old to me. When she told me that she was having the aches and pains that seemed related to aging, it was hard for me to reconcile this with the vibrant and active person that she was. On the other hand, she was known among us to live on the edge, waiting till happy hour for a good drink or two, would say, "Oh, phooey," and then look at you and say, "You know what I really wanted to say, don't you?" She was fun and knew how to have a good time. And although she always loved her grandchildren, it seemed to me that she fully embraced and loved the grandmother role as her grandchildren became adults. And it was then that she fully got to know them, appreciate their quirks, welcome their partners, and learn about their passions. It was as an adult, too, that I came to fully understand my grandmother and to appreciate her. Due to the fortune of her good health and her eagerness to know me and be known by me, we went through periods of talking all the time, and then weeks that would lapse without connecting. In this way, talking to her always felt like talking to an old friend. We disagreed on movies and music. She shirked all my recommendations and walked out of countless Oscar hits. And she told me that all the good music in the world had been made in her generation. Had I actually listened to Frank Sinatra? And had I tried Barry Manilow? She loved to share stories about her life. She talked to me about her friends at Trip Lake Summer Camp in Maine. She talked about meeting my grandfather Alfie and knowing he was the guy for her after just 7 dates. She talked about A and the many family members who had embraced her as their own after his death. She talked about her friends at the hospital where she volunteered, and her neighbors, and the families of all these people. She talked about her friends, Arlene, Mitzi, Georgine, Marilyn, Doris, and all the others, and their legendary bridge games that had spanned 30 to 40 years. She'd update me on her sister, Aunt Lizzie, her nieces and nephews and cousins, and the happenings in everyone's lives. She talked about her rabbis and her temple and all the nice people who she knew who went there. She talked about Cleveland and who was who. And what was so clear to me through all these conversations was that she loved people. She loved being around people, and she generally gave them the benefit of the doubt. She believed that a life well lived involved connecting to others and being connected within a community. This past July, my husband Zeke and I brought our daughter, Sophia Ruth, to spend time with her great-grandmother. It was the second time that they had met. The first time was 10 days after Sophie was born, when my grandmother hitched a ride at 94 years old from Cleveland to Chicago so she could hold her first and only great-grandchild. In July, when they saw each other again, they were like old friends. Sophie, 15 months old, and my grandmother both shared many commonalities. They both were trying to ditch their walkers, curb their bottle habits, and improve their sleep hygiene. They laughed and played together on the floor. I am so glad that Sophie and Jima got to spend these days together. It was special beyond measure. But since I know that Sophie will unfortunately not remember it, I will tell her about her great-grandmother and what an amazing woman that she was. I will tell her about the importance of connection. That, to me, is her legacy. May she rest in peace.
In honor of Marge's love of technology, I'm going to pull out my cell phone for a second to get my notes. And just take one little water. Sorry. One of my fondest memories of my grandmother was a recent trip to Mayfield Heights to see her. And you get to 140 Fox Hollow Drive, and you get to the front area, you press the button, she buzzes you in, you walk through the lobby, you go to the elevator goes up a couple levels, you walk down the hallway, and as I'm coming around the corner, every single time, without fail, she's standing there in the hallway, in the doorway really, in the latter years on her walker, just staring at me. And you're like, either she doesn't trust that I'm actually going to get there, or she just loves me so much that she wants every single second that she can have with me to be able to have that. And I really believe that it's probably a little bit of the former, but definitely the latter. Because when I would leave, she would come out to that little porch area outside of her, on the exterior of her apartment, and she would just be standing there, beaming through that screen door, the screen area, just smiling at me and extracting every last second that she could from our visit. And it was just, it's an incredibly special and unique relationship. For my sister and I, Grandma Margie, or as we affectionately call her, G-Ma, was the only living grandparent that we had for most of our adult lives. And I never thought that we would end up, all of us, getting the amount of time with her that we did. To say that she was unique would be a bit of an understatement. You meet thousands of people in your lives, and some of them rarely make, an indelible impression on you. And I can honestly tell you that there is absolutely nobody in this world like Grandma Margie. She has a vibrancy and a youth that belied her years. There's an old adage that wrinkles tell stories. She had no wrinkles, and she had a lot of stories to tell. And if you were to ever walk into her apartment, into her den, there are just these boxes crammed with pictures and trinkets and frames and black and white photos of her family's history and the old department store and all of these documents that represent her life that she clutched so closely to her. And I'm not going to lie, it would have been nice if she'd updated some of those pictures from our awkward teenage years that were in those frames for forever, and you know what I'm talking about. But it was a museum, it was a testament to her family and to her relationship with her family. And I know we've been talking about the fact that, Grandma's I appreciate the fact that she's a blend of interesting contrasts. On one hand, she's very fickle. As my Uncle Robbie mentioned, we would always joke it was a race to the top to see who was the favorite grandchild, and literally the last person to make a phone call or visit her was the favorite grandchild. But her love and her appreciation for us was ocean deep. And I can tell you that at every point in our lives, every key point in our lives, she was proud of and wanted to know about our relationships, our quirks, our personalities, our passions, our successes, all of that. She was the person you would seek out to talk to about it because she is G-Ma and because she did care so deeply. It has been mentioned that she didn't necessarily love technology. She was not much for text messages. That was never going to happen. There was no Gmail for G-Ma. And there was an iPad experiment that went horribly awry. Uncle Robbie can tell you about that. And yet she's the only 90-something-year-old I know who is on Facebook, liking all of our experiences, commenting, living vicariously, and really wanting to know every inch of every second of our lives and what was going on. Kind of a paradox in that way. And, it was mentioned that she's perhaps a bit stubborn, and I would like to close with this. To my understanding, she's only aware of one breakfast place in all of the greater Cleveland area, and that would be Scramblers, which we'll be attending in her honor later. She would get to the airport 4 hours early. Who does that? But that's what she did. And she could sniff out cockiness and a shall we say, a challenge to authority like it was her radar, like it was her job. And I know that there was just this look that she would give you. It wasn't a scowl per se, but she would kind of stop and freeze for a second and look right at you like she was looking through your soul. And you knew that you had done something in that moment that you wanted to undo. I know I received it a lot when I was growing up. I'm sure that my dad received a lot when he was growing up. And yet, no matter what was going on with your relationship with Grandma Margie, the obstacles that you faced, where you were at that specific point in time, she had this incredible ability to forgive. And she would send us these cards. And they would always have this giant kiss mark on it. And be it a check or a birthday note or whatever it may have been, no matter where you were at that point in your life, you were going to get that card. She was going to look beyond whatever specific friction or challenges you were facing at that moment in time. And I just think that that lipstick is a metaphor and a signature of who she was. It was thick, it was ever-present, and it was brimming with love. And that is who Grandma Margie or G-Ma was, and that is how I'm going to remember her. Thank you.
Each of us has precious memories of Margie. We take a moment now as we silently compose the eulogy of our own hearts. Our tradition teaches us, birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made this journey stage by stage a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. We ask God to welcome Margie's soul with the words of El Malay. Please rise. El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Ba'maromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Lenishmata Shel Hachala Olama, Baal HaRachamim, Yitzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava, V'nomar, Amen. O God, full of compassion, Thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest unto the soul of Marjorie W. Brock, who has departed from this world. Eternal One of mercy, bring her into your presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou her possession, and may her repose always be unto peace. Amen. And together we pray the words of Kaddish as we once again affirm our faith in God and in humanity. Together we pray, Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, V'alma divra chirute v'amlich malchute. B'chayachon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach leolam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. A miracle is ended. A precious soul returns to her Maker. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'arav le'tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you, along with all the mourners of Zion and of Jerusalem.
Will you please be seated? I can't help but to make a personal comment about the service that we have all experienced. We rabbis try very hard to honor the deceased with words that really describe the particularity of their lives and of their qualities. And I dare to hope that from time to time we succeed. There is nothing, I'm sure you will agree with me, than the tributes offered by children and grandchildren. These tributes come from their hearts and mirror the depth of the relationship that they have experienced over the years of their lives. And I know I speak for all of you to say that we have been really blessed with a wonderful and composite tribute to Margie, a wonderful, wonderful person. I just want to also announce that the family of Marjorie Brock will receive friends at Lander Haven Party Center, 6111 Lander Haven Drive. They'll receive friends immediately following this service and until 4 o'clock this afternoon. Once again, on behalf of the family, we are so grateful for your presence here with us this morning. This concludes our service.